Join us at Walters on Friday, October 4th for our end-of-season podcast party. The evening is scheduled from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m.
The NFL season is finally here, so make sure you're ready with NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV. It gives you the most live NFL games all in one place, exactly what you need to make your Sundays more magical. Sign up today at youtube.com/Sunday Ticket. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games.
Here's a pitch, swinging a line drive to the left. That's going to be a base hit. One run will score. Rounding third and heading the plate is the second runner, Sosa. He scores. The throw in cut off by the third baseman Tatum near the mound. The other runners move up. Stubbs ends up at third, and Schwarber, with a hit to drive in two, ends up at second base. And the Phillies extend their lead here in the top of the fifth inning with a two-run single for Schwarber. RBIs 103 and 104. It's now the Phillies 4 and the Nationals 1. Now the set. Here's the kick and the pitch. Swinging a line drive left field over the leaping shortstop Turner, a base hit. Nunez scores from third. Stopping at second base is Luis Garcia Jr. Juan Yepes has driven in his 26th run of the year. 2 runs home here for the Nationals in the bottom of the fifth inning. It's now the Phillies 6 and the Nationals 3. Getting it ready now. The pitch, swinging a line drive. One outfield by Gallo at first. Gonna take it to the bag himself. And bang, zoom, a curly W's in the books. The Nationals secure themselves a series win over the Phillies in the final 3-game series of the year.
And welcome to Nats Chat for Monday, September 30th, 2024. Along with MASNsports.com Nationals insider Mark Zuckerman, who is at Nationals Park. I'm Al Galdi, host of the Al Galdi Podcast. The 20th season of the Washington Nationals being the Washington Nationals, off the franchise moving from Montreal to Washington, D.C. in the 2004-2005 offseason has ended. The season ended with a 6-3 loss to the Philadelphia Phillies at Nationals Park on Sunday afternoon, denying the Nats a 3-game sweep. This installment of the Nats Chat podcast brought to us by Mason Kalfas and his team of 10 legal recruiters at Zenith Legal in Washington, D.C. Check out Mason's website today, zenithlegal.com, or call or text Mason anytime, 202-486-3535. So the Nats in the Major League Baseball 2024 regular season go 71-91. That was the third worst record in the National League, but matches the team's record of 71-91 for last regular season. In terms of run differential, the Nats for the 2024 regular season run differential of minus 104, third worst run differential in the National League, though an improvement over the team's run differential for the 2023 regular season, minus 145. As we have been discussing for months on the podcast, there is a lot to take in from this Nats season, and there is a lot to be thinking about with the Nats 2024-2025 offseason. We are glad to be doing these things with you on this, the final installment of the Nats Chat podcast for the 2024 season, although we will be doing episodes sporadically during the offseason, and we are hoping to see many of you this Friday evening at Walters near Nationals Park for the 3rd annual Nats Chat podcast party this Friday, October 4th, 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. What is the Woodstock, the Lollapalooza, the Coachella of Nationals podcast parties. We were excited for that. But Mark, the season is over, my friend. It has been a pleasure doing this podcast with you once again for this, the 4th season of the show. What sort of strikes you when you think about this now concluded Nats 2024 season?
Yeah, so as you said, it's our 4th season, and through no fault of our own, we started doing this in 2021 when hopes were high and payroll was high, and we thought that this was a team that was going to try to make another run through October, and then it all fell apart and the rebuild started, and now here we are at the end of the 4th season, and I know the record is the same, and people, it's okay to be frustrated by that part of it. I don't think there's a problem with that, but I feel more optimistic than I have in the last 4 years, and I think everyone should feel that way and feel like this season was a significant turning point in the process. They're not there yet. Absolutely not. There are a lot of things that need to go right for them to get to where they need to go. And I think there is pressure on them to get there next season. But I think we will look back. I hope we will look back on this season as the one in which we went from a majority of players that were being used being short timers, retreads, the old guard, to now moving forward to the core of the team that's going to make up their next winner whenever that happens. And it was an important transition that needed to happen. It happened. There were a lot of good things that happened within it. There's still some struggles and some causes for concern. But I that's my biggest takeaway from it, is that I remember we said at the beginning of the year, it's not going to be about the team they start the year with, it's the team they end the year with. And while they weren't winning a lot of games here at the end, it was much more enjoyable for me to watch this group of young players who does feel like most of them have a chance of being a part of this in the future than it was watching the teams that we saw to end the last season and the season before that.
It was so much easier to be invested in the team this season because you felt like you were watching players who could be real pieces for the team moving forward. You have not had that feeling a lot in previous recent seasons. I think you had that for so much of this season. It was an odd season. I mean, my hope for this season, I said this actually late last season, was that this season could be like the Orioles 2022 season, a season in which the Nats maybe don't necessarily make the playoffs, but at least perhaps contend for the playoffs, or at the very least, demonstrate improvement to where you know that the rebuild is working. Because I think sort of a tried and true thing with recent rebuilds that work in the majors is that when they work, you don't have to wonder if they're working. The performance sort of slaps you across the face and says, yeah, it's working. And so I was hoping we would get that this season. I don't think that we did get that this season. I do think, though, we got enough positive developments to where if you believe that the rebuild is working, you're not foolish for believing that. Like, I think that there is significant reason to think that the rebuild is working, but we do need to see more. And it's just an odd deal. Like we talked about this on the last installment of the podcast with the starting pitching. There's just a lot to take in. You have these very negative developments this season with three perceived key pieces in the rebuild in Josiah Gray, Cade Cavalli, and Jackson Rutledge. But you have these unexpected positive developments with guys like DJ Hurst and Mitchell Parker, to say nothing of the improvement of Mackenzie Gore. And I still would say Jake Irvin, even though I know his season didn't end in a very good way, to where I think it's still a net positive with the Nats starting pitching for the season, but not in the way that you would have anticipated. And so I think you have to sort of monitor everything here and be willing to look at things from a macro view instead of getting sucked into, well, Cade Cavalli had a really disappointing year, so, we should be down on things. Well, maybe, but not necessarily. So to your point about next season, I think it's massive. I think there is rebuild fatigue with Nationals fans. A rebuild should work within 5 years. Next season will mark year number 5 of the rebuild, if you consider the rebuild having started in 2021. And I think that if next season we aren't talking about significant improvement in terms of wins and losses, I think you may well could see changes, big changes with the organization. So to your point, I think there's huge pressure on the club to perform well next season. But it is an odd deal. Like, we can talk about the positive developments of this season. The fact that overall team performance, the fact that the record is not one of those developments is just kind of a weird thing to digest if you're a Nats fan.
It kind of makes the whole season like a contradiction, because if you didn't know what the record was and you just watch this season compared to last season, you should be more encouraged by it. You have to see the young talent they have, the improvements in the pitching staff, as you said. And yet you look at the bottom line at the end and say, well, was that actually better or not? And I think what it boils down to is this, and I heard a few players talk about this the last few days as you asked them a lot of questions about kind of summarizing the season. They talk about that next step now is learning how to win. There were a lot of games that were right there for the taking for them, whether early or especially late in games. And while they were maybe better at that than we've seen from them in the past, there still weren't enough where they truly seized the game late, made the most of it, and looked like the better team and found a way to win it. And that can boil down to plate appearances late in games. That can boil down to relief pitching. That can boil down to fundamentals like base running and defense. I think those things, you get better in those areas, you're going to see the record flip. Now, there's no guarantee that's going to happen, of course. And how do you turn a team that hasn't learned how to win yet into a winning team? How do they learn that? Some of it comes from within, just natural growth and experience. Some of it comes from the addition, hopefully, of veterans who have been there before and kind of help show them the way of how to do it. And yes, some of that comes from coaching. And it's why, as you said earlier, and I've been saying this, I do think there is a lot of pressure on everyone going into next year, and that includes the coaching staff for certain. It's time for them to start getting the most out of this young, talented roster. And that has to translate into wins. You know, if they are losing games next April and May because they ran themselves into outs, or because a hitter comes up just needing to get a runner in from third to tie a game and, strikes out or hits a weak ground ball and doesn't put together a good quality at bat, those kinds of things are going to be a reflection of the coaching staff. And so I do think there will be pressure for that to improve. So you talk to guys in the clubhouse, they all, to a man, like they truly believe they're close. They think they're on the right track. They know they need to improve in a lot of different ways. They know they need reinforcements to the roster, but they feel like they're close. And now it's that next critical hurdle. How do you learn how to win? How do you pull out these close games late? And it'll be interesting because I think it's very easy to look at what the Kansas City Royals and Detroit Tigers have done. Teams that kind of looked similar to the Nationals last year and even the first half of this year at times, to now make the playoffs with young teams, not big payrolls. And they learned how to take that next important step and now make it to October. Is there a blueprint there? Can the Nationals look at that and say, hey, that could be us if we just do things a little bit better next year?
Yeah, and I do think that something like what has happened with the Royals is a source of frustration. If you're a Nats fan, how did the Royals go from 56 and 106 in 2023 to now making the postseason in 2024? And so you do ask those questions of why can they do that? And our team is in the midst of this like really deliberate, methodical rebuild where it seems like the improvement and the progress a step-by-step nature, and it's not this like giant leap forward that, like I said, you often do see in successful rebuilds. Look, as is the case in many things in life, the result is going to drive the narrative. If the rebuild works, we will look back on the Nats 2024 season as part of the process, necessary growing pains, etc. If the rebuild does not work, we will look back on the Nats 2024 season as, you know what, there were signs that this thing wasn't going well. There were signs that this thing wasn't working. It's not unlike the Nats 2020 season. The result drove the narrative on that. You could say, well, 2020 shortened season, COVID, yada, yada, not that big of a deal. In hindsight, 2020 was the beginning of the end. And that's how you now frame it, knowing what followed that. So we will see what comes of the rebuild. Next season is massive. This coming off season is massive. What will Mike Rizzo be allowed to do by ownership? We've been talking about that. I don't think we can emphasize that enough.
Are you a lawyer that hates your boss even more than you hate jerks in Profar? Does your law firm always fail, just like the San Diego Padres? Well, Nats Chat sponsor Mason Kalfas is the best legal recruiter in the DC legal market, and you should give him a call. Mason specializes in working with law firm partners, associates, and senior government lawyers in antitrust, securities enforcement, energy, and life sciences. Mason is the founder of Zenith Legal, a 10-person legal recruiting firm with recruiters in D.C., New York, Philadelphia, and other cities. Mason has placed partners and associates in over half of the AmLaw 100 law firms. All conversations are 100% confidential and focused holistically on your career goals. Some lawyers change jobs for more money, some change jobs because of client conflicts, and some change because their colleagues are losers like the Padres and Phillies. Step up to a World Series winner and hire the best legal recruiter out there for free. Call Mason Kalfas today at 202-486-3535.
Hey, Al Galdi here to tell you about the latest great offer from Window Nation for listeners of the Nats Chat podcast. 2 free windows for every 2 windows that you buy, plus pay nothing with no interest for 2 full years. If you have been thinking about getting new windows, now is the time. Get with Window Nation, 866-90Nation or windownation.com, and tell Window Nation that you want the deal that you heard about from Al Galdi on the Nats Chat podcast. September has arrived. A great time to replace your old inefficient windows with energy efficient windows from Window Nation, you can get a free, no obligation quote from Window Nation right now. Contacting Window Nation and seeing what new Window Nation windows would cost you costs you nothing, obligates you to nothing. 866-90Nation or windownation.com and take advantage of the great offer for listeners of the Nats Chat podcast. 2 free windows for every 2 windows that you buy, plus pay nothing with no interest for 2 full years. 866-90Nation or windownation.com. That's 866-90Nation or windownation.com. And tell Window Nation that Al Galdi sent you.
The best way to learn a language? Immersion. Living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards this year, you could still learn a language the second best way. And that's with Babbel. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Here's a special deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners for a limited time at babbel.com/natschat. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/natschat. That's spelled BABBEL.com/natschat. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Now the set of the pitch. Swinging a ground ball right side. That's going to go through a base hit into right field. Rounding third is Young. He will score. Nunez heading for third. The throw there will be cut off into second base. So Luis Garcia Jr. has driven in both Nationals runs of the game. His 70th RBI of the season, scoring Young from second and sending the blazing, speeding Nunez to third. The Nationals have runners on the corners with 1 out. It's now the Phillies 6 and the Nationals 2.
In terms of what went down in the 6-3 loss to the Phillies on Sunday afternoon. So I do want to start with a positive. I love the way Dylan Cruz ended his season. He was not going well, and it was starting to feel like, man, this is kind of a bummer how his initial stint at the major league level is going here. Boy, did he have a really good series. Just looking at what he did over the 3 games, he was an starting right fielder in each game. 6 for 10, triple, a double, 4 singles, 2 walks, 2 for 3, with stolen bases. Specific to Sunday, Cruz in this game, 3 for 3 with a triple and a couple of singles. He went 1 for 2 on stolen bases. This is the Dylan Cruz who we are all anticipating ultimately seeing, and him ending his season like this was awesome.
Yes, and he knew it, and he made a point as we talked to him after this last game to say that it was important to him to finish strong. He's always had that approach anywhere he's played. He wants to leave on a high note like that. Just from a distance, it felt like he was extra motivated in this series, whether it's because of the last one, whether because it was the Phillies, whether it's because of bigger crowds, whatever that reason might be, he was more motivated and looked like it on the field. I thought he was going to go for the inside the park home run in this game, and he stumbled around second, and maybe that prevented it from happening. But what I saw there was not just a talented player this weekend. I saw a very driven player. And that's what everybody has talked about him as, hey, this guy's a winner. He's always done it everywhere he's gone. He demands a lot of himself and of his teammates. And, it's hard to do that in 5 weeks in the big leagues when you're the youngest guy on a team that's losing. But I did hear from people that they really respect his approach to everything, his competitiveness. And while he's not going to come out and say like he's a leader of the team already by next year, I think he's going to be a little bit of a lead by example guy. And I think he wants to bring out the best in his teammates. And if he plays with that kind of fire and enthusiasm every game, I think it's going to rub off on others. And we may a year from now be talking about Dylan Cruz being such a critical part of this team, not just for the production, but maybe the mindset and the approach and the energy that he's going to bring to the game on a nightly basis.
It is so hard to see this Nats rebuild ultimately working without Dylan Cruz and James Wood being the franchise type guys they were acquired to be, right? I mean, of course, anything can happen. And, you can live if other guys don't pan out. But if they don't pan out the way that they're supposed to pan out, it's hard to envision how this thing ends up working. So to see Cruz play like a franchise guy in this series, just so encouraging. Also shining on Sunday, Luis Garcia Jr. And when you talk about the most encouraging individual player developments from this Nats season, I don't think it's wrong to say that Luis Garcia Jr. is number one. You can make arguments for other people, but I mean, think about Luis Garcia Jr. back in March/April. We're looking at Trey Lipscomb potentially as the new number one second baseman. And how laughable does that seem now with the season that Garcia put forth? He in this series was the Nats starting second baseman for each of the 3 games. He, over the 3 games, 6 for 14 with a homer and 5 singles. Also had a stolen base. Garcia on Sunday afternoon, 2 for 5 with a solo homer and an RBI single. He had a Nats 1-run first, had a leadoff homer to right center to cut the Nats deficit to 2-1. The homer going a projected 409 feet per Statcast. So Garcia off on Friday morning being named the Nats Player of the Year as voted by members of the local media like our friend Mark Zuckerman. Garcia for this regular season, number 1 among all qualified Nats players in OPS at 762. Number 2 on the Nats in home runs with 18. To me, this was the best offensive season by a Nats second baseman since peak Daniel Murphy, 2016-2017. He was still here in 18, but started to fall off in that season. It had been a while since the Nats got real legitimate offensive production at second base. Garcia gave it this season, and very encouraging what he ended up doing this year.
Look, if I told you on opening day that Luis Garcia was going to end up with 25 doubles, 18 homers, 70 RBIs, 22 steals, a 762 OPS, and good solid defense at second base, you would have been thrilled with that. That would have almost seemed impossible based on what we had seen from him last year and the narrative of him going into spring training. This was a huge step up season for him. He was the best player on this team all around. Now, in the long run, he probably shouldn't be their best player. If he is, that means some other guys have not lived up to their potential at all, or he has just taken off to another stratosphere that we don't necessarily expect it from. But what he did was firmly establish that he is a part of this thing moving forward, an important part of it, and can really be a complete player. As I just said, hit for power, hit for average, ran the bases well. At 22 steals, only 5 caught stealing. He ran the bases very well and showed so much improvement at second base. And so I don't think you can overstate the significance of what this year was for him. And in a perfect world, we get to a point where they've got so much, else going on in the lineup that he's like your number 6 hitter or 7 hitter. That's going to be really good for them in the future. So I was happy to see him do that. We met him when he was like 19 years old, called up at 20. He's grown in the big leagues, and sometimes it does take a while, and it's a good reminder of that. And yeah, the tough love they showed him and gave to him, it worked in the end. And I do think that some of that is what makes Mike Rizzo and Davey Martinez feel that C.J. Abrams can handle his situation well as well, because they saw how Garcia responded in a not an exactly identical situation, but there are some similarities there.
Well, what's so funny is if I would have told you at the beginning of the season, when it comes to maturity questions for a Nats middle infielder, we will have more questions about the shortstop than about Luis Garcia Jr., you would have said, what? And yet that's exactly the case as this Nats season ends. And yet, to the point about Garcia's age, I think that's so crucial because he came up when he was so young. I think there's a perception sometimes that maybe he's older than he actually is. This was his age 24 season. For comparison's sake, this was Trey Lipscomb's age 24 season. This was Darren Baker's age 25 season. Okay, Garcia's younger than Baker. I mean, think about that. So Garcia is still so young. He's always been talented. Nobody's ever disputed that. And really good stuff from him this season.
If you are a fan of Vampire Weekend, then Game Time is your spot. They are performing at the Anthem on September 30th and October 1st, just after the Nats season wraps up. Game Time is proud of their ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. They also offer a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code NATSCHAT for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code NATSCHAT for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Walter's Sports Bar has been recognized by many local publications as one of the best sports bars in Washington, D.C. located across the street from Nationals Park and open year-round.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Hey, Nats Chat, want to tell you about Mint Mobile's premium wireless package starting at $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/natschat. That's mintmobile.com/natschat. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/natschat. $45 upfront payment required. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigs on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
Full count, 3 balls, 2 strikes. He needs a strike for 90 innings out of the bullpen. Into the wide, and here's the pitch. Strike 3 called with a fastball to the outside part of the plate. And Derek Law can take 90 innings out of the bullpen into the offseason.
Well, there was a negative for the Nats in their 6-3 loss to the Phillies on Sunday afternoon, and that was the outing that was put forth by Jake Irvin. You know, we had a ready-made storyline for the conclusion of this series. Trevor Williams ending his season well on Friday evening. Mackenzie Gore ending his season well on Saturday. Jake Irvin, we needed you to complete the trifecta. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Now, I still would say his season more good than bad, but this outing on Sunday afternoon was bad. 6 runs in 4 1/3 innings. He gave up 5 hits, which were a double, and 4 singles. He issued 3 walks. He recorded 3 strikeouts. He over 66 pitches through 41 strikes, 25 balls. Kind of an odd outing. Got off to a bad start, then settled down, was going well, and then went back to not doing so well. So when you break down Irvin's 2024 regular season, first of all, the workload was really good. 33 starts, 187 and 2/3 innings. The ERA ends up being 4.41. You break that down further. 18 starts to begin his regular season, ERA of 2.80, exceptional. Final 15 starts, ERA of 6.50. That is an ugly earned run average over his final 15 starts, off him being so good over those first 18 starts and off having that pre-All-Star break portion of the season that made many of us feel like he should have been on the All-Star team. So not the ending to season that he wanted, and it was unfortunate that he had this outing on Sunday afternoon.
What it really boiled down to were the blow-up starts and even more specifically blow-up innings that he had. 5 times in the second half, he gave up 6 or more runs in a start. That includes this last one. That's why the ERA rose the way that it did. And it reminds me somewhat of Mackenzie Gore last year, where we said, boy, the bad starts really kind of got away from him. When he was good, he was really good. And now he's got to learn how to minimize the bad ones and just make him kind of average. I think that's exactly what Jake Irvin's season was. I think what's so interesting, you compare him and Mackenzie Gore. Gore ends up with an ERA, half a run better, 3.90 versus 4.41, despite the fact that Irvin's whip was 1.2 and Gore was 1.4. So what's the difference? I see 2 things there. It is letting those innings get out of control, as we said, and he also gave 29 home runs, which is a lot. And that is something he's going to have to get better at. And it kind of ties in with the big innings and the blow-up innings. So overall, absolutely a positive season for him. He showed that he's a workhorse. I think he finished 5th in the National League in innings. Most innings by any national starter since 2019. That's great. And he showed when he's on, he had some really, really good starts for them. He looked at his best like a good number 2 starter on a good team. He's got to now eliminate the bad ones. He's got to learn how to finish out the year strong. And maybe what Gore did this year is kind of a roadmap for him in some ways. They're not the same pitcher, not at all, but there are some similarities, at least in terms of the performance part of it. And I'll be really interested to see what Jake Irvin turns into next year, because there is another level for him to get to. He knows that, and I think he's motivated to take that next step.
The 2.80 ERA over his first 18 starts says that he can be a very good major league starting pitcher. That's not a tiny sample size, and to do that speaks very well of what he's capable of doing. You just hated to see the season unravel like that. I do think the homer was the biggest thing. I mean, Davey Martinez during his post-game presser with you guys, I know brought up the walks. To me, it's the home run. Like, he gave up a lot of home runs, especially as the season went on. He cuts down on that, a la Trevor Williams from last season to this season, and you could be looking at a different story. But I still would categorize this as an overall good season for Irvin. I think we feel better about him. He's not a finished product, but the idea of him being, say, a good number 4 starter, maybe even with some improvement, a good number 3 starter is very much in play. So unfortunate ending to his season, but still a lot for him to be proud of. When it came to the Nats bullpen in this game on Sunday afternoon, Joe Lasorsa 1 2/3 scoreless innings. We did get a Jackson Rutledge appearance, 2 2/3 scoreless innings. And we did get, I am happy to say, a Derek Law appearance. He threw a mere 6 pitches. He faced one batter, but he got the out. He recorded the strikeout. He becomes the first Nats reliever to total at least 90 innings in a regular season since Tyler Clippard in 2010. We, on the last installment of the podcast, wondered if Law would get to 90, and he does end up getting to 90.
Good on him for wanting to pitch, but good on Davey Martinez for letting him pitch. And that's a personal milestone that means a lot to Derek Law. It may also mean something to his wallet. He's still got another year of arbitration. If you're his agent and you're having those discussions, whether it ever gets to an arbitration hearing or not, you better believe he's going to point out the fact that he threw 90 innings and how few guys do that. And that could earn him a little bit more of a raise this winter. And so that's something that Davey didn't have to do, or the organization could have said to him, hey, make sure Law doesn't pitch anymore. We want to keep him at 89 2/3 because we might save a few bucks because of it. So good on all of them for letting that happen. And I can tell you right now that Derek Law is going to be supremely motivated next year to try to throw at least 3 more innings and top Saul Rivera's club record of 93 relief innings from 2007. And let's remember, he did this while spending 2 weeks on the IL. I mean, that is remarkable to think about. As we said the other day when we talked about him, he was a very effective relief pitcher for them this year. The inherited runners thing was a problem early on in the first half. He kind of then got to start just having clean innings. He was a very effective and very valuable member of the bullpen and should be again next year.
Yeah, and the inherited runners thing, as annoying as that was, that is kind of a fluky random thing that can fluctuate year to year. It's not unlike hitting with runners in scoring position. So, you can be bothered by it, but I think it's also important to remember it could entirely flip in the other direction next year. I don't think it's necessarily an indication of him as a pitcher. He did good work this season. He has a lot to be proud of with what he did. So the Nats season ends. In terms of Nats free agents this offseason, there really aren't that many. Patrick Corbin's going to be a free agent. We know that he is as good as gone. Trevor Williams is going to be a free agent. That'll be interesting. We presume that Joey Gallo will wind up as a free agent, but not many decisions in terms of players currently on the roster to be made, right?
Yeah, right. Jacob Barnes, I think, is the only other real prominent one, maybe, for a guy who spent the season here. I think Williams is the most interesting call, as we've discussed. I think there would definitely be interest in bringing him back in a lesser role as a swingman, long reliever, maybe 5th starter. But I also do wonder if other teams look at him and say, hey, we could offer him a full-time starting job. And maybe they see, hey, you give him 5 innings, he can be effective, and they make him an offer that he has a hard time turning down. So I'll be interested to see what the market for him does look like this winter. I think Corbin is pretty clear to say on both sides of the equation, they were acting like they knew this was the end of the road, although I think he's going to get a deal from somebody, a big league deal from somebody who just needs the innings, and they'll be interested to see who that is and what kind of contract that turns into. Gallo, God bless him, the defense at first was really good, and I do think that was important. And down the stretch, he was a better hitter. He wasn't a great hitter, but he was a better hitter for them. He hit 3 3-run homers in a 9-day span, which would have been lovely to get earlier in the year and with a little more consistency. If somehow they end up with him coming back or signing somebody comparable to a 1-year deal, that to me is a huge indictment of ownership and says that they really are not serious about getting back in the game and trying to be competitive. First base is the position to watch this winter. I really think they have to go. It's not all in, but you got to make a real effort there to bring in somebody who hits for power, who plays good defense, and somebody you can get on a multiple year deal. This can't just be a one and done thing, try to flip him at the trade deadline. You need someone who's actually going to be seen as a contributor for this team for several years to come. And so I really want to believe that that's going to happen. And I think that will be the telltale sign from ownership. If they do that, then I feel good about the direction that they're heading. If they don't, and we end up with another 1 year, $5 million first baseman, that's a really bad sign in my mind as far as how ownership is approaching this.
We know that MLB free agency moves at like a glacier pace these days. So unfortunately, we're probably not going to know with certainty what ownership has allowed Mike Rizzo to do until months from now. Like maybe not even until, January, February, just because free agents tend to linger these days. So, if November passes and December passes and the Nats still haven't done anything big, but there still are prominent free agents to be had, I don't think that necessarily means that the Nats are not spending. We'll see. But that is the number one storyline this offseason for sure. What is Mike Rizzo allowed to do? What does he do in terms of trying to upgrade the ball club? This installment of the Nats Chat podcast brought to us by Mason Kalfas and his team of 10 legal recruiters at Zenith Legal in Washington, D.C. Check out Mason's website today, zenithlegal.com, or call or text Mason anytime, 202-486-3535. One of the things that we've had a lot of fun with on the podcast this season are shout-outs, what essentially have been the Nats Chat podcast versions of messages on the scoreboard at Nationals Park. And so we've gotten a lot of great shout-outs from people toward other people, birthday wishes, congratulations, etc. We have one final shout out here. This is from Brent and Linda Stone, and the shout out is to us. So it's kind of weird reading this to us, but we'll go ahead and do that. It is to myself, Mark, Tim Shovers, and the Nats Chat podcast team. Right, Brent and Linda Stone. Thank you for taking us fans both inside each game as well as the development of our Nationals throughout the year. Each and every podcast, you brought us insights into the previous day's contests and set the event within the broader context of the season and the franchise. You took us from Mitchell Parker's winning MLB debut over the Dodgers on Jackie Robinson Day at Dodger Stadium to the top of the 10th, 3 outs on 2 pitches at Oakland Coliseum, from the emergence of Jacob Young and Luis Garcia Jr. as regular players to the debuts as well as statistical firsts of James Wood and Dylan Cruz, from the ups and downs of the starting pitching to the surprising resiliency of our bullpen, from the team's MLB league-leading stolen base total to our numerous defensive challenges, and so much more. Thank you guys for a great year of deep diving into Nats baseball, while Linda and I, unfortunately, will not be able to join you at the year-end party. We say goodbye until next spring. In the style of Al's closing words, we'll catch you next year on the Nats Chat podcast. Thank you very much for that, Brent and Linda.
Yeah, thank you, Brent and Linda. That was very interesting hearing you read that as you describe ourselves on there. I think what we've learned in the 4 years of doing this is how much of routine it's now established for fans out there. It's a routine for us every night after the game to get together and do this, but it's become a real part of fans' daily routine, whether they stay up late to listen at the end of the night or get up in the morning to listen to it. And that's exactly what we all hoped this would be. The loyalty that you all have shown us has been tremendous. The numbers have remained so consistently strong despite the team's performance. I mean, I don't know that Tim would have started this if he knew what those 4 years were going to look like from 2021 to 2024. And we all believe that when this team starts winning, our numbers are going to grow even higher to levels that we believe that it can get to. But even through the losing, the loyalty, the commitment, the passion from the fan base out there has been unquestionable. And it's been our pleasure to bring that to you. We know that there's interest in this. We know even with the local football team, Al, off to a great start and getting a lot of people excited, we know there is still a lot of baseball fandom in this town. And there are a lot of fans that desperately want this team to start winning again. I'm hoping that happens in 2025 because I think it's time. I think everybody understands it's time to get back on track for that. And if it does, I hope it means even bigger and better things for our podcast.
Absolutely. We enjoy what we do. We are very proud of what we do, but we could not do what we do without you. And so we thank you very much for listening. And we're looking forward to the party at Walters this coming Friday evening. Should be a lot of fun. Always enjoyable to put faces to names. You know, you get emails from people and then you see what they look like and you hear what they have to say to you. And it's a ton of fun doing that. We've done it the last 2 years. It's been great. So it should be a lot of fun. Again, that's this Friday evening, October 4th at Walters, the #1 sports bar in Washington, D.C., 6:30 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. So you can hit us up on X at Nats_chat. You can always email us as well, natschatpodcast@gmail.com. Like I said, we'll be doing episodes during the off-season sporadically. As news warrants, we'll be coming to you on the podcast. We do have a website that we invite you to check out, natschatpodcast.com. You at that website can purchase a Nats Chat Podcast t-shirt. We thank all of you who have done that. All Nationals radio highlights on Nats Chat, courtesy of 106.7 The Fan. So from Mark Zuckerman, I'm Al Galdi. We thank you for listening, and we will talk to you next time on the Nats Chat Podcast.
And the pitch swung on it high in the air to left field. Verdugo going back. Still back to the warning track, to the wall, and it is gone! Goodbye! Bang! Zoom goes Dylan Cruz with a majestic, soaring fly ball that just kept on going. Into the back of the Yankees bullpen in left center field. A game leadoff home run, his first in the major leagues for Dylan Cruz. And his family, well, they're on their feet. It's the Nationals 1 and the Yankees nothing.